Also on the playground before they put the new school was the industrial arts building.
Yes.
And Mr. Hugh Payne
Yeah.
was, he did all kinds of upholstery. He had a cabinet maker and everything. He was hired to teach the young men industrial arts. And Mr. Hugh Payne has had his own way of grading. A was for awful. F was for fine. And many of the young men in there, they mixed them up. They would get an A on the project. He said, no, that's awful.
Well, I was in that, I had to get a half a unit before I graduated. And I had passed on my other classes, so I took industrial art. I made a table. Yes, I kept it a long time. So I'm proud of myself.
I got three pieces now that I made in high school. One's a seating chest, one's a cocktail table, and one's, 4 pieces. A bookcase and a lamp.
I didn't make
A 3-tier bedroom lamp.
Antiques.
Yeah, and they are still in my brother's house.
And can you imagine the how when I came here, they had cut out football. And they said they wanted to start up a team and never have seen a group of boosters. I can't remember all the names, but they said, we got a booster club, but we would love for you to start up a football team. Football team, I said, well, we don't have about 18 boys in high school. When we put on the football team. But, and when he told me upstairs, we had a little storage room for our equipment, and I knew some fellas in runoff in the boosters, they gave a lot. But never in my life that I've seen, I guess about the ones that didn't play, but the community supported that. And I'll never forget, we played Covington. In the third quarter, they had us 79 nothing. And so, they had about, I guess they had maybe 3 times our number boys in there. And I said, my gosh. And I said, well, the fellow said, well, Coach, because I was strict, Coach, I'm doing the best I can, but what else you do? I said, son, there's nothing else you can do but be a man, let's finish the game. And of course, the other thing about it, the people used to love to hear us come across from the school with the cliques on, all the people staying out there. And as John said, that we had one of the first editorials they wrote about our good growing society and teaching things. And I taught them how to love themselves. They're talking about love now. I have a little thing now I keep with me. Love to you, and while you treat yourself as others, and you won't have no problem.
That's right.
And the other thing I always went with people, as they mentioned in here about a text I always believe in, about wisdom of a house is built by understanding is established. Proverbs 24th chapter 3rd verse. And that meant that I had to understand the situation of where they had segregation. In fact, as you get a little more on, I tell you what I had to tell the superintendent when I left. And he had to tell me something. But God works, because his son and daughter-in-law had to work under my leadership. So you don't know who you mistreat, you might have to face back again. And so when I saw the superintendent, he all dressed up, coming to Ronald, telling us about how, he was getting his dissertation, and how you should act with all races. And I, of course, naturally, people can almost tell how I was halfway, I squirmed. So I was so what they had, he said, Mr. Chubb said, when I was over at Clifton Forge, I had to go along the program. I said, you still ain't this. And I would whip you right now. But the amazing thing about it is I said this, that his son and daughter-in-law had to work under my leadership. And every time, I never did tell his son and all, but he would give them me, tell Mr. Chubb, he the best thing in the world. And I never did tell the son or the daughter that. They had to work with me on 2 programs. So you don't know who you might have to look at before it's over, if they got good endurance.
That's true.
And so when I share things with people, I just tell the truth about it. And I tell you, you got some people straddle the fence.
Amen.
You know, you got some that say you down the corner, the same thing, just to play the game. But the thing that I'm saying, 2 things happen when you get old. You know what they are? You wish what you said or you wish what you have done. I don't feel nothing.
We had casino bears, you know, they all came back from service and had to get the GED and finish. And they won every champion. They were good. I mean, they were all that had gone and served 4 years in, and they were called casino bears, and they were working for the skid.
Well, a lot of those same fellows played high school ball, and my first 2 years in high school, we were practice dummies because we had those World War II guys. They could play high school football until age 25. And we had successful teams, but until they graduated, we couldn't get on the field at game time. But when we got on the field, we were really tough. We were really tough.
Absolutely, yes.
That senior year I was telling you about, we went to Christiansburg one very cold night. People had fires on the sidelines, just how cold it was, and we beat them. WKEY used to broadcast our games, and even with the broadcast, when we came back home telling people we had won, they didn't believe it. We beat Christiansburg. Yeah. And another thing, of my senior year, one of my classmates was the school janitor. I think the job paid $60 a month. A guy in the class followed me named Earl Cash, and I were his helpers.
Yeah, I remember.
And we got a quarter of his salary apiece. And when the Moody School janitor would send new brooms down, he'd send 1 broom. And Earl and I get in a fight. Who's going to put the new broom?
Great memories, great memories.
And I must tell you, I remember 3 principals. I think when I started school, we had Mr. Woodson, then we had Mr. Yearwood. Mr. Yearwood was a tough man. He was really a tough man. He came from the West Indies.
He was a Jamaican.
He was a Jamaican.
West Indies.
And he took nothing. He didn't want any leftovers. And I remember the day that a truckload of desks, chairs, came from Clifton Forge High School.
From Moody School.
Oh, Moody School, I thought it was Clifton Forge High School. Okay, well anyway, it came from one of the schools up there. And Mr. Yearwood, when he saw the truck pull up, he walked down the steps. And he went out to the steps and he said, what are you doing? Talk to the men. They said, we've done though this here. He said, close it up and take it right back. You do not want it.
Take it back.
And of course, there's our classmate, Charles White, that lives in Buckingham County. He has written a couple of books about the people in Buckingham and also people in Clifton Forge. And Mr. Yearwood, he wrote about Mr. Yearwood in there. Mr. Yearwood was blackballed from the state of Virginia. He could not teach because of what he did for us. He didn't want any secondhand stuff. When the young men would have to get their football uniform, they came from Clifton Forge High School.
That was their practice uniform.
Yeah.
We had to buy playing
But
uniform.
anyway, he said we will not accept them.
And by the way, excuse me, I don't mean to cut you in. I can imagine what Mr. Yearwood, because that's what the superintendent did for me. In other words, of course, wasn't always for me. I wouldn't sign the contract because I found out I got $350 for coaching 3 teams by myself, and somebody else they were getting like $1,000. So the superintendent, the principal said, well, you didn't sign your contract. I said, I'm not until I see the superintendent. So I went in there and he was telling me what all he's done for Jefferson in comparison, and I'm accusing him. So anyway, I dressed up for y'all what I did the contract. And he said, I see that you never get a job in the state of Virginia. So when I went home and I told my wife, I said, I'm gonna call the superintendent in Ronald and tell him what happened. And I called on the weekend, and she had her problems too. She said, young man, if you got the nerve to call me on the weekend, I got nerve to see you Monday morning in my office. So I went in there and she told me, said, I'm telling you, now he sure messed you up, you'll never get a job in the state of Virginia. I said, but if you can get me 2 recommendations from your college, then I will hire you. And sure enough, they wrote me a recommendation. One guy named Mr. Bice, he wrote me a recommendation, unbelievable, saying, if you want a man that's like all-purpose seaman, you hire children. And so the rest is history. I went from there straight up until they hit me again, and they closed the school in Roanoke, and Lord have mercy, didn't I raise hell? They told me I'm going to be an assistant principal. I said, no, I'm going to be a principal, but you better fly me home in 15 minutes to be with my family. And you can imagine 48 years ago how they made it hard for me. And my stock went down again, but you know what deal me up? The parents. Oh God, they had all kind of special days for me and all, so they couldn't get rid of me, you know, till I got rid of myself.
You all have mentioned about the used materials that you received from the white schools. What about your textbooks, paper, pencils?
Let me tell you about my textbook. Up to this day, you know, we had the reading of Dick and Jane. I don't even know whether Dick caught Jane because the pages were torn out. It was torn out about, I never knew the end, and most of our books were torn. That's the truth. If it was the middle page, or either they were scribbled on, so I never did know where Dick caught Jane, but but we learned, we had to take what we had. Most of the pages were torn out, and as June was saying, I was with my senior year, Mr. Yearwood, they bought those football, all the things from Moody School, where we had to, each one of us took the football things, and we carried them through the street from Jefferson back up to Moody. And I said, my mom's gonna kill me. I know I'm dead. But we drug those, they were dirty, they were ragged, but he gave each one of us, it was 16 in our class, he gave each one of us one to carry back. He said, now walk through the street and carry back. And we did, from Jefferson to Moody, and put them back in the hallway, and then we left, yeah. And we didn't know what was going to happen after that. Nothing happened after that, but he made us carry them, walk them back up there. Yes. We did it.
I started the school in 1953. No, I'm sorry, 1955. Let me back that up. In 1955. I started school in 1953 when the new Jefferson Annex was built. Okay, and I think, you know, when I'm listening to, you know, the years that separate us, you know, I truly understand that. But I think we were right at the gateway of cultural change that was coming about. And not in 1953, but it came about later. And I think that we were recipients of that struggle that came before us. Because I remember we had crisp new books, Harcourt and Brace, I believe they were, or Janovich books. And, but the books that we had, I always thought that we couldn't relate to the books because they were about Dick and Jane and baby and all that. We couldn't identify, you know, as far as activities, but the adventures that they did. But we concentrated on the phonics, on the vocabulary, on the writing, in order to get us to the place where we could read. So we did benefit from all of that, and I'm grateful for that, because our teachers They improvised, you know, and I see that now, how much they improvise. And we were talking about some of the uniforms that we tried to get when the basketball team started. We had a girls' basketball team, which I played on, and we had to buy our uniforms. But we couldn't afford the uniforms. And the school did not supply the uniforms. So we had to do fundraising. But we did a lot of fundraising. We had a homecoming contest every year, and the homecoming contest brought in money. We also we would charge for school dances, and that brought in money. There were many avenues, and some of the black-owned businesses during that time, you know, would donate to the school in order for us to have uniforms and supplies, even equipment. I remember when Coach Chubb was talking about the Booster Club. You know, we had a very strong Booster Club of parents who came to all the games. They ran the concession stands, and all the monies that they collected from that, they gave to the school. And that's how we were able to get some of our uniforms.
That's great.
But of course, too, I heard Lily speak about the cafeteria. After I graduated from Jefferson High School, they closed the cafeteria down. And the parents started a new cafeteria. And I remember when my first child went to Jefferson. We had a cafeteria that the parents would get together and they would have food for those children. Now, at one time down there, when they closed it up, the cafeteria just stayed there. Wasn't a thing in there. And I remember the lady that ran the cafeteria, and some of you might know her, Miss Thelma Jackson. She was the cook in there. Miss Thelma Jackson was a good cook, and she cared about those children. She didn't want a child to go hungry. If there was a child that couldn't afford their lunch, she gave them lunch. And she didn't want anybody to say anything about it. But the cafeteria did close down, and I was one of the parents that helped cook food for the children when they went. So the cafeteria wasn't there all the time.
It wasn't there when I started. We walked back to lunch and walked. We didn't have a cafeteria.
Now, my generation, when we came along, the kids that lived too far would bring their lunches and eat in the cafeteria. But there wasn't any service.
And we usually ate downtown at Miss Emma's or Miss Sweetie's.
If you're in the money.
Let me tell you, Miss Emma, they had a reduced lunch price for us when we become regular.
See, she was one of the younger ones. We couldn't afford it.
Well, like I said,
I was lucky to get a Sunday overnight.
but we lived almost a mile from the school, so we didn't have that opportunity or that choice to come home for lunch. So I guess our parents made accommodations. Now I can name off a whole lot of kids that ate with us. So it must have been an affordable lunch that Miss Sweetie offered.
Yeah, because we used to get a sandwich. I graduated in '62, and I went to Miss Sweetie's for several years for lunch, and her bologna sandwiches were 15 cents, and the Coca-Colas were 6 cents. Mama would give us 26 cents every day. And this is what she'd do. And Olaf, I remember this so well, because Olaf Fitzpatrick and I would go to Miss Sweetie's every day, and we would eat, and we'd have a nickel left over. And on Fridays, we would go to Newberry's and buy 10 cents worth of Spanish peanuts, 15 cents worth of corn candy.
I wasn't that fortunate. I had to walk it both ways down back to the tree.
Okay, we're going to go down the line, and I want each one of you to tell me what made you successful by attending Jefferson. Either.
Oh, okay.
Either end is fine.
You know, I often, I thank God for the opportunity of living during a time of such unrest, as you might call it, in the world, because it affected us. as we were preparing ourselves to go for higher education and to go out and find a job. Of course, we knew our mobility was limited because, we didn't have summer jobs. We didn't go. The only thing, the opportunities that we had during that time was actually to work in someone's house, cleaning a house. And that was not where our mindset was at that time, because I felt like we were advancing, as I said, in a different direction. So when I was offered the opportunity to go to school, I think that it was our teachers that actually put us in the mindset of a higher education, put us in the mindset of achievement, I often remember the song that we sung during our assemblies, and that was Lift Every Voice and Sing. We called it the Negro National Anthem. Those words had so many implications for our lives to inspire us to do things. And I guess I'm a romantic at heart, but I took them seriously. I thought that that's what we needed in order to motivate us, and not to mention the fact that we were spiritually endowed to want to press forward, to do things. And if we can remember that our leadership during that time of unrest was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who, did things in a peaceable manner. He was a Christian at heart. And so that was where our mind, for instance, came from. My inspiration came from, in order to desire to go to do things a little different.